Miskonoodinkwe. Welcome to the 23rd Annual First Nation Public Library Week. My name is Dina Nebianakwit, and I am Ojibwe from Atikameksheng, Anishinaabe. I am one of the First Nation consultants at Ontario Library Service, alongside my colleague Nancy Cooper from Chippewas and Marama First Nation. Ontario Library Service has supported two important Indigenous programs for over 20 years. First Nation Public Library Week was initiated in the year 2000, by on-reserve public librarians operating in Ontario at that time. The goal of the program was to promote Indigenous literature and culture in municipal public libraries and to highlight and celebrate the importance of public libraries on reserves in Ontario. We have come a long way in the last 23 years. First Nation Public Library Week was born as a grassroots initiative. As a result of the pandemic, it has become a digital event so that all library staff and patrons can access quality Indigenous programming curated by on-reserve public librarians and OLS staff. More of the history in our program process can be found on the First Nation Public Library Week website. Ontario Library Service has also supported the First Nation Communities Read program. Nancy Cooper, my wonderful and supportive colleague, has managed the FNCR program for the last 8 years. I would like to congratulate Nancy and Ontario Library Service for celebrating 20 years of dedication to the First Nation Communities Read program and their dedication to Indigenous authors from across Canada. The FNCR program offers 2 monetary prizes to an Indigenous author from the children's category and 1 prize to the young adult/adult category. More information about the program and this year's winners can be found at www.fncr.ca. Before I get started with our guest's intro, there's a few housekeeping items. This session is being recorded and will be made available on the First Nation Public Library Week website. We'll be discussing with Christine for about 35 minutes today, and if you have questions or comments throughout the session, please include them in the Q&A function or the chat function at the bottom. And I'm pleased to welcome today's guests, who is a First Nation Communities Read shortlisted author for their title, Silence to Strength, Writings and Reflections on the 60s Scoop. Christine Miskonoodinkwe Smith is a Saulteaux woman from Peguis First Nation. Her publisher, Kaganance Press, published her memoir, These Are the Stories, Memories of a 60s Scoop Survivor in 2011. Christine is an author, editor, writer, and journalist who graduated from the University of Toronto with a specialization in Aboriginal Studies in June 2011, and went on to receive her Master's in Education in Social Justice in June 2017. Her dedication to the voices of 60 Scoop survivors is wonderfully woven together in her latest publication. Chimigwech Christine for taking the time to join us today. I will start by asking about your decision to start your writing career with a memoir.
I've been writing memoirs ever since I was a teenager. My memoir came out essentially through when I attended the Banff writing residency for 2 weeks, and I wrote short stories I compiled short stories then, but I was under the guidance of Kateri at Dam, and then when I came back from Banff, I had 10 days of mentoring, online, and then I kind of just left it for a little bit, but then I got back to it. And I guess I wanted to start with my memoir because it was a huge part of how I started my healing. Because mainly it just helped me get all the issues I felt inside um out on paper. And I had been to a few 60 Scoop Survivor gatherings, and I felt inspired by Colleen Heel Cardinal by her writing her book. And I I you know I got to do this because it really helped.
Thank you for sharing. Um, yeah, we did talk about the importance of writing and healing in the past. And I know that you attended a 60 Scoop conference last year and you presented as an author there. And did you feel like some of the 60 Scoop survivors that you met connected with writing as a form of healing?
Um, I I believe they did, but I mean, I did it virtually, so I wasn't really there in person to see how they were afterwards after I presented. But I have made friends with the people that contributed to my anthology, and they told me it really helped them a lot.
Yeah, and the anthology, which I mentioned earlier, is shortlisted for the 2023 First Nation Communities Read, is really quite beautiful. And it felt like you were meeting the people that were writing the story. Like they're being so vulnerable, right, about their experience. And so it's a big commitment to write your own memoir, to be so vulnerable in that way. So what was that transition like from publishing your own memoir to encouraging others to do the same in this anthology?
Um, I actually never really thought of the transition from publishing my own memoir to the anthology. It just seemed like a natural process to me. Um, because of the 60 Scoop gatherings I've been to, and hearing other people's stories, I I thought it was important that other survivors were able to get their voices heard and out on paper. And I initially put a post up on Facebook and just said, what would people think if I was to do an anthology? And like I did get a couple of people saying, "Oh, no way!" But overall, I had a good turnout of people who said they wanted to contribute, and that's how it. I feel humbled that the contributors trusted me with their story, and allowed me to be a part of the process of getting their story out.
And the editing process as well. We interviewed you earlier this week for First Nation Communities Read, and in your bio, you mentioned that you're an editor as well. So when the stories arrived, there was an editing process that took place, and there's a lot of trust in that relationship. When somebody submits this story to you, and you say, "Oh, I'm going to change a couple things," or "I'm going to edit it." Um, why is that trust so important in this process of editing?
When somebody's submitting like a really vulnerable story, you kind of have to think back to how you felt when you did your like I mean when I did my memoir, I just went back to how I felt through the editing process, and then um I basically applied it to how I approached the other writers when they submitted their stories. I wanted their voices to be in the stories, so I made sure that when I edited that they were like they were okay with what I suggested or what I like was took out or whatever, and then I mean, it was a lot of back and forth. So I had like a million emails, but and then at the very end when I submitted the manuscript to Kegadon's, Patricia Campbell, she um helped do the final edits, so that was really helpful.
And thank you for mentioning Patricia Kignons. Because in addition to building that trust with the authors in the anthology and yourself, there's also an importance of building trust between the publisher, yourself, and the authors. And it's a business relationship, right? It feels a little bit different, or it can feel different. So what role do publishers have in maintaining a trusting business relationship with indigenous authors?
I think they play a huge role in maintaining trust, because if it wasn't for their openness, um, I don't think I don't know if I would have or if I would have submitted to them. If they don't share a space where you feel safe as a writer and them as an editor, then that's gonna be a huge wall to get to between maintaining trust. So, and Kegadon's had a lot of patience with me throughout the process, because I mean, personal stories, especially when they come from trauma, um, can be very triggering. So um, they were very patient with that and allowed me to go at the pace that I needed to.
Miigwech, and just to continue that conversation about trust, because it's kind of interwoven in all of our experiences as people, as community members, but the library plays a role in that as well. So if an Indigenous author is invited to a public library to share these stories and to know that there could be potentially some triggers with the audience members with 60 Scoop or adoption, residential schools, is there something a public library can do to ensure the authors feel safe and that the patrons are safe and that everyone will have the resources needed if required throughout a live presentation or a virtual presentation?
I think it would be beneficial to both parties to have resources available. And when it's being when a book that is potentially triggering is being presented, because like an elder, or like even like a tip sheet or whatever you call it, um, just about how to do self-care or how to um, take care of yourself, um, even after the event or whatever. And I remember the launch for Silas's Strength. The contributor, who's a really good friend of mine, Tyler Pennock, he did a grounding exercise after everybody was done, and that was like the best thing that um he could have done, because it was very um heartbreaking to do hear the people's stories, and um by the grounding exercise, everybody, it helped to calm everybody so that there wasn't like any agitation in the room or afterwards, kind of thing.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. And I think it's important to plan ahead to make sure that these grounding exercises or even smudging or elders are present, like to have some support in the room when talks are taking place. You don't want anyone to leave an event, a library event, feeling badly. You want
Yeah,
them to feel like there's some sort of resurgence or some sort of power put back into the person, right?
yeah.
Um, I think I actually want to jump and ask about your relationship with public libraries. This is First Nation Public Library Week. It's to celebrate on reserve public libraries and their importance, and also to celebrate municipal public libraries. So, in your history, do you have any highlights or memories with a public library?
Libraries have played a huge role in my life. I remember as a child, um, I would I would try to go into libraries, and just sit in their chairs somewhere when I was running away or trying to get away from what I was experiencing. And my first job when I moved back to my hometown, my where I grew up, was at a library, and I actually was a page, and I was the everybody would laugh because I was the one with the huge cart of books and reshelving books, and then our boss in between people doing that saying no, nobody is supposed to be sitting on the ground and reading books, because I was very guilty of that. I would see a book that I was reshelving and look at the one that's beside it and go, "Oh, I want to read it." So I I would skim it a little bit, but then as soon as my boss was around, I was like, "Oh my god, I gotta get back to work." So that was my that was memorable, and um, I learned a lot, being a part of the process of sorting books, reshelving books, um, and then actually learning how to rebind books when the spines of the books were broken. And and then I joined the Indigenous Advisory Council at the Toronto Public Library, for like I think 5 years. I just recently stepped down because I've been really busy, but yeah, but libraries have basically always played a huge role, and now I have basically have my own library. And I get teased a lot because my friends come over and they're like, "Oh my god, how many books do you have?" So yeah, are huge, and reading has been a very huge part of my life.
Miigwech. We always love hearing about how people are using libraries, loving libraries, um, but also how people engage with literacy and the importance of lifelong literacy. So you said that you have a large collection at home and you're still a library user. What is, just in general, the importance of lifelong literacy?
Um, it's really important, and I because it without it we wouldn't have the stories that we have in our communities or in our families. Um, and uh, reading and taking reading and exploring different genres of books, um, helps to expand your worldview and experience other people's, um, uh, I don't know what you would call it, mindset or like worldview of what they've written. So, and it passes along stories, to people behind us. or whatever. I can,
Yeah, and I get what you mean about the importance of having the worldview and understanding people's experiences, um, and the fact that publishing work solidifies your voice in history. It will always be, your book will always be there. It could always be read. And it kind of relates to, at least in Anishinaabe culture, the importance of storytellers, and they're sometimes called knowledge keepers, and how oral history has played such an important role in our community's history and retention of language and culture. Um, and I know that there are some of our pieces of our oral history that shouldn't be written down for certain reasons. But there are other stories that are important to be documented. Um, and I've heard on reserve public librarians say that in the past. I wish more of our people would become authors. I wish they would put pen to paper. So there's a little bit of a learning curve there for storytellers who feel that they can take that leap into publishing. And I'm wondering if you have advice for storytellers, knowledge keepers, or just, the guy from the res that just is a good storyteller and gets the crowd going. Do you have any advice for them to become authors?
my advice would be to never give up. Um, if you feel you have a story inside you, um, just start writing, even if it's in a small little notebook and you have it in bits and pieces, because then eventually you can put it all together. Um, my memoir came very late in my life. I would have loved to have written it a few years ago, but I also wouldn't have, it wouldn't have been the same as how it came out now. So don't be afraid to start with like small publications, um, or even um, small publishers, because helping small publishers is very important.
That's right. And kind of just going back to the trust with the publishers, right? Finding that group that will support your writing and finding the publisher that will support your writing. Those people are out there. I think the Indigenous literature and author circles is changing quite a bit. So it's a good time to put pen to paper and get those stories out there. Um, I have one final question, and it's a question that I've asked almost any Indigenous person I've interviewed as of late. I just love the concept of Indigenous joy and what that means. Um, it's just so nice to hear everyone's answers about what joy is to them and what joy is to their community. So, Christine, how do you or members of your community experience joy?
I think humor is very important. Um, with all that's thrown at us as communities or individuals, um, humor plays a huge role because I find that without laughter, um, it's it's possible that I wouldn't have made it to where I am now. And having friends and a support circle is like really important because they'll come out to your events if you're or listen and give you like feedback afterwards, that kind of thing. So humor and support is very important to, or like having friends is what brings me joy.
And I think that's kind of a common thread through everyone's answer. It was the joy of just being together and celebrating. Some people mentioned powwows is where they get joy. Some people mention watching community members watch the young ones like participate in powwow or community events. So yeah, I think it's a big part of everyone's culture globally to be together and experience joy that way. So I'd really like to thank you, Christine, for taking time to speak with us today and to close the 23rd First Nation Public Library Week. I don't think it'll be the last that we hear from you and that we see your name on a First Nation Communities Read list. And I would just like to congratulate you on this beautiful anthology. As you mentioned, it was lots of work and lots of trust building to get these people's stories out into the world. And I encourage everyone to go and buy a copy, maybe directly from Kegnon's Press. And yeah, just celebrate everything that we've accomplished and overcome as Indigenous people in this country and celebrate the joys of Indigenous literature. So Chimigwech to everyone and all of our viewers, and we'll see you next year for First Nation Public Library Week.
Thank you.